so long since I've seen you. I thought you were 10 by now, but you're only 3 still. She just had her birthday in November. Hi, Liza and Andrew and Nolan. Really working them stairs. You know what I thought we'd sing today? It's a really hard one. It's about a boat. Can everyone make a boat? Like this? Can you make a boat, Nolan, like this? Well, Andrew's got a boat. Elijah's got a boat. Emma's got a boat. Okay, here. Don't stand so close to the edge. You're scaring me. Okay, here we go. It goes like this. There's a boat on the Sea of Galilee. Oh, wait, I forgot the sea part. Okay, here we go. There's a boat on the Sea of Galilee. There's a boat on the Sea of Galilee. There's a boat. There's a boat. There's a boat on the Sea of Galilee. There's a man, like this, like you're praying. There's a man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There's a man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There's a man. There's a man. There's a man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There are hands on the man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There are hands on the man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There are hands. There are hands. There are hands on the man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There are nets. You got nets? There are nets in the hands. There are nets in the hands of the man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There are nets in the hands of the man. You're right. I got to get it right. You got it, Elijah. I'm going to follow you, okay? Here we go. Try again. There are nets in the hands of the man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There are nets in the hands of the man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. There are nets. There are nets. There are nets in the hands of the man in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. All right. Oh, that's all I can do. Oh. I know, right? Well, we're just taking it one day at a time, Nolan. He'll get there. You can have that one. Nolan? Good job, good job. Okay. Thank you guys for helping me sing that song. There's several more verses to it, too. Can I help you down? There you go. Ooh. That's fun. I love it. My assistant wrote me a poem to start with today. It's called When Judah Kissed the Lion. Judah kissed the lion's face and did not hear the roar. For kingdoms shaped by human hands dream crowns and nothing more. He walked with him through Galilee, saw blinded eyes made new, yet still imagined glory's throne as something power would do. He thought perhaps a silver spark would light the longed-for flame, would force the king to take his crown and vindicate his name. But lions rule by mystery and thrones are carved from trees. The scepter hid in splintered wood, the crown in agony. Judah reached with restless hands to hurry heaven's plan, not knowing heaven's deepest work would look so unlike man. And we who bear the covenant, who speak his holy word, how often kiss the face of Christ, yet miss what we have heard. We want the shout of victory, the trumpet and the sign. He builds his reign in broken hearts and calls that reign divine. O lion, gentle lamb once slain, when we would seize control, forgive the Judas in our hearts and realign the soul. For even when our faith betrays and all our hopes collapse, your mercy weaves through handed over nights and resurrection dawns perhaps. Judah kissed the lion and thought the story done, but love walked through betrayal's gate and rose the faithful one. I love that. But I don't really love the story of Judas so much. Not talking about the Bible story so much, but really this is the way I hear Judas, his story. Judas, I noticed it this week, first time I ever noticed, but Judas's story, we're in Mark 14, and Judas's story is in Mark 14. But did you ever notice it's in 3 phases in Mark 14? In the beginning, right after Mary's beautiful act of devotion, she anoints Jesus. Right after that, and all the arguing and yelling about that, Jesus talks about himself dying. But after that, immediately, Mark says, Judas ran off to talk to the religious leaders to make a deal. Then later, in the middle of Mark chapter 14, during the Lord's, we call it the institution of the Lord's Supper, where Jesus said, he's handing out the bread and the cup. But in that supper, Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me. And they ask, well, who, is it I? Is it I? Who is it? And he says, the one who dips his bread in the dish. And then the last part, at the end of the chapter, like in verses like 40 something following, that's where Judas arrives with a bunch of soldiers. And he greets Jesus with a kiss. Betrays Jesus with a kiss. So 3 movements, 3 scenes of Judas's betrayal. I'll say something about that in a minute. But the way I normally think about how we hear the story of Judas, that guy who threw me under the bus at work, he's a Judas, right? That backstabber over there, he's a Judas. Anybody ever have a Judas in your life? One of those guys, right? We think about how all the forces rallied against Jesus. And in Mark, it really highlights that as we come into Jerusalem, because we have all those religious groups and the political groups, and they're all coming against Jesus. And so you've got those guys against Jesus. You've got the devil and all his demons against Jesus. You've got the Romans going against Jesus. And then Judas going against Jesus. That guy, the betrayer. And so the story of Judas always seems like he's that guy out there. There's Jesus and there's us. We're with Jesus. And then there's all those forces and all that rallied against Jesus, and there's Judas, the one filled with Satan, the one who, is a spy within us, and he just, he loves money, and he used to get into the purse, and steal, and that evil guy out there. I just think that's how people think about Judas, or at least that's my impression of how we think about him, as the guy out there. But the Bible really doesn't let us think about Judas that way, as the guy out there. In fact, in Mark 14, Judas is identified 3 times. 3 different times. It says, Judas, one of the 12. He's not depicted as the one out there, that guy who's not with us, that one guy. And in fact, if you think about the time of Judas with all the disciples, like, why in the world did they allow that guy to carry the purse if everybody knew he was not like them? Judas was there all alone. when Jesus called the disciples, didn't he call Judas? How'd Judas get to be one of them? I imagine Jesus called him too, right? Judas was there when Jesus walked on water. Judas was in the boat too. He saw Jesus calm the storm. He ate and drank with tax collectors and sinners with Jesus and the rest of the disciples. Judas was there the whole time. He's there when Mary does the anointing thing. And he's not the only one mad at her for doing it. As far as I can tell, everybody thought of Judas as one of us. In Mark 14, when talking about that supper, Judas, like Jesus says, one of you will betray me. And notice what the disciples say. What did they say? I said it already. Is it I? Like Peter's over there going, is it I? And John's over there going, is it I? And James is over there, is it I? Nobody was saying, I bet it's Judas. Did anybody say that? Not as far as we know. We know what some of them said. Everybody's like, I. And they had reason for saying it too. They knew who they were. They knew they had mistreated that Gentile up in Tyre and Sidon area where they didn't want her to reach Jesus. They restrained her for a while until she drove them nuts. They knew that they were there yelling at Mary, and they were. They scolded her for what she did. They knew that just like Peter, who thought Jesus as Messiah had a certain path laid out for him. He's going to be king. He's going to reign in Jerusalem. He's only 30-something years old. We're going to get another 40 years out of this guy, like some of the kings of old. Everybody's thinking about Jesus the same way. Peter thought it. Judas thought it. Everybody thought it. All of Israel thought it. He's one of us. They're sitting around and they're saying, is it I? They know they were fighting about who's the best on the road to Jerusalem. James and John knew that they were saying, I want the best seat. They knew. In fact, the text tells us when Jesus said, hey, what were you arguing about on the road? They didn't want to tell him. Why? Why not? Because they knew. So everybody's sitting around. Somebody's going to betray him. Is it me? Is it me? Nobody's saying, it's Judas. We know he's a jerk. He's a thief. We know he's a bad guy. Nobody. So he's not that guy out there. He's here. He's close. He's one of the 12. In fact, and I was telling the Bible class this morning, I stayed up really late arguing with the second version of chat when you run out of, if you have a free chat GPT, if you run out of the really smart one, it gives you a lower one to deal with. And so I argued about this too. And we went back and forth because I was trying to get the logic across. But here are the facts. At this supper, we know from John, from the Gospel of John, that at the supper, and you understand, they're not sitting at a table in chairs with everybody around a table. We got that? We're laying down on our left elbow or forearm, and our torso, the rest of our body is kind of out away from the table and behind the guy to our right. You get that? And there's somebody to my left, and he's also next to the table, and his body goes out behind me, and he's to my left, right? And so you're sitting there eating from the table. We know from the Gospel of John that the beloved disciple, who we believe is John, who writes the Gospel, he's never identified in the book of John, but because the disciple John's never mentioned, it looks like him. The disciple John, James's brother, is the beloved disciple who writes the book of John, so that's why we call it John. But anyway, we're told that disciple is right here in Jesus' bosom. So that's an honored position. And then they're all around the table in that kind of way that their bodies are aligned. Jesus takes the bread. And they say, well, who is it? Is it I? Is it I? Is it I? How does Jesus identify the person who it is? Anybody remember? Rusty. The one who's dipping in the dish with me, the same dish, and the one he gives the bread to when he dips it, he gives it to him. Anybody go to Little Italy and King? We love that place. I mean, we just do. They do such a great job. We love them. But one of the things we love there is whenever we order, we also get the side order of the bowl of oil, olive oil, with all the herbs, and we ask them to fill it up with garlic, like extra garlic, and even extra garlic. You know, when you have daughters, the garlic wards away the vampires, is what I mean. So lots of garlic. No, but we love it. We just love it, right? But you know, when you've got 6 or 8 people at a table, everybody's not reaching in the same dish. They can't reach, right? They can't reach. So you know, Jill and I we'll take some out of the bowl and put it on one of them saucers and have it between us, and we'll just scoop up that garlic and dip in the oil. And it's so good, right? We love it. But we share a dish. We're dipping, and we're able to be close to each other. We're both doing it, but we're not dipping way down there, 4 or 5 people down. We wouldn't be able to reach. So they're around the table, like I said, and Jesus dips his piece of bread. How many people are within his reach, laying down that way, without having to get up and try to lean? How many people is able to dip in the same dish? I'm thinking 2 other people. John, who's here, who can reach that same dish, and somebody else who's here, who can reach that same dish. And who could Jesus reach? I mean, I got short arms, I know. You know, some basketball players, their arms go down almost to their knees. I mean, I got short arms. But I don't know if Jesus' arms were short. We're not going to do the Zacchaeus thing today. He could have been short. Not Zacchaeus, Jesus could have been. But anyway, how many people, when you're laying on the side, how many people can you really reach to offer a piece of bread? It doesn't seem like you can go very far. So Jesus says, the one who dips in this dish with me means he's really close to Jesus. And then Jesus gives him the bread, which means he's really close to Jesus. And it's not John. So who is it? Judas. So where does that put Jesus around the table? If John's in Jesus' bosom, I mean, I can't prove it, just like I can't prove Jesus washed Judas's feet. But it says he washed the disciples' feet. I have no reason to believe he didn't. Whose bosom is Jesus basically in? Judas. He was one of us, one of the 12. We like to think of Judas as having this evil intention, and he's going to sell Jesus out because he wants the money, about a third of a year's wages. He's going to get that money, and that's how Judas is presented. But the text is giving us other information that doesn't fit that. He's one of us. He's close. He's carrying the purse. He's in one of the honored positions next to Jesus. In fact, Jesus is eating, and he's laying in Judas's bosom, I think. I don't know where else to put him around the table where it all works. But there's more to the story of Judas that also has to be understood. After Judas betrays Jesus, we're told in Matthew, I think it is. Matthew 27, I think. When it says, when Judas saw that Jesus was condemned, he took the money and he threw it at the Pharisees. And he declares Jesus innocent blood, which he had betrayed. He betrayed innocent blood. He throws the money back. And then he goes and he kills himself. He takes his own life. That tells me things did not go as planned. Do you get that? That's the response of somebody who is grieving because things did not go as planned. And so what if it's not just evil intent, it's not just an outside spy in there trying to get money? What happened to the guy who's trying to get money? He had the money in his hand. What did he do with it? He threw it back at him. What was more important than the money to him? He didn't like what was happening to Jesus. Well, if he didn't want Jesus condemned, what did he want? He wanted what all Israel thought they wanted. They thought that was God was doing. We know Satan entered him and caused him to do this, but what exactly was he thinking he was doing? We get the idea that we think he was betraying Jesus. I don't think he thinks he was betraying Jesus. There's another way to read this. In Mark 14, when Judas goes to betray Jesus, when he goes to do it, he goes right on the heels of the statement that Jesus makes defending Mary's actions. Why did Mary anoint Jesus' body? Why does Jesus say she did it? To prepare for his death and burial. Judas immediately went. Did Judas want Jesus to die? I think he went to save Jesus' life. Jesus is talking about this confrontation that's going to end in death. It looks like Judas is trying to save his life. It looks like he's trying to save his life because Messiah is supposed to take David's throne and reign on it for a long time for Israel's sake. Judas believed that. We remember Peter believed it. Jesus said, "Who am I?" And Peter said, "You're the Messiah." And then Jesus started saying, "When I'm going to Jerusalem, they're going to kill me." And what did Peter do? Peter said, No, that's not the way it's going to happen. That's not our plan. And what did Jesus say? "Get behind me, Satan." We got Satan in both cases. Was Peter evil intention against Jesus when he said it? Did Peter have any evil, like I'm trying to hurt Jesus when he said it? No. Peter did not want Jesus to die. He wanted Jesus to be king. Judas, I don't believe he was trying to get Jesus killed. None of that fits. But he does it. In the scene in Mark 14, Mary accepts Jesus' version of Messiah and anoints his body for death. None of the disciples are there. They're yelling about the money, and none of them are getting it that Jesus is on his way to die. Except I see Judas is getting it, but he doesn't do what Mary does. He doesn't just accept it and then does what he can. Mary did what she could. Judas, he did what he could, but not accepting Jesus' messiahship. What he could do, he went out to try to get Jesus together with the religious leaders, thinking that would change the direction of the ship. Change tracks that this train is on. I mentioned that. Well, let me go here first. I got to say, it's my poem was about. You heard it was about Judah and Judas, and that's curious. Why? Well, Judas is the Greek version of guess which name? Judah. If you were there in your hanging around Judas in your gatherings of Jewish people, you don't call him Judas. You call him Judah. That's his name, Judah. Just like in Greek, Jesus' name is Yesu, but his Hebrew name, which is probably what everybody called him, is Yeshua. Yeshua. That's his Hebrew name, Yeshua. Judas's name is Judah. That's his name. And so here's the story where Judah betrays Jesus. You remember Jesus was a lion of the tribe of Judah. And here we have Judah betraying Jesus. But it doesn't stop there. The imagery doesn't stop there. It's not just Judah betraying Jesus. There's a larger narrative. When we read in the gospel, especially the Gospel of John, when John talks about the opposition of the Jewish leaders, it just talks about them as the Jews. It doesn't mean every Jew. I mean, Jesus was a Jew, right? But the opposition of the Jewish establishment, they're against Jesus. And so often it's like the Jews did this. The Greek word for the Jews is Judaoi. Judaoi. That's the plural. That's the Jews. Judaoi. Well, what does that sound like? Judah, the plural of Judah. That's where we get the name, the English Jews. They're the people of Judah. Understand, Judah is basically all that's left of the 12 tribes of Israel at the time of Jesus. It's just Judah. There were 10 tribes, there were 12 tribes, and in about 700 years before Jesus, 10 of those tribes were conquered by Assyria. Assyria came in and they carried off 10 tribes of people. They didn't kill them, they didn't imprison them, they didn't make them slaves. That's not what they did. They dispersed them throughout the Assyrian kingdom, which was pretty big. And they said, you live over here, and you live over here, and you live over here, so they couldn't rally together and fight back against Assyria. But they were productive citizens. They were just made part of the people. It's called the diaspora, if you've ever heard that term. That's the 10 tribes. No, they didn't go to America and become the American Indians and then the Mounds, and Joseph Smith found that out and all that. That's not what happened. They did not. They were dispersed in Assyria. We know that historically. So that's the 10 tribes. 2 tribes left, Judah and Simeon. Simeon is just a small circle in the larger Judah, which is a pretty big tribe. And Simeon, it gets absorbed into Judah, but I think this is because about 600 years before Jesus, Babylon came in and carried everybody off to Iraq, to Baghdad. They came in and just carried everybody off. And about 70 years later, about 536 or so, they were allowed to come back. You know how many people came back? What, in a percentage of all the people that were taken away? Because after 70 years, you know, a lot of people died and a lot of children were raised and intermarried and families and businesses because they weren't enslaved, they weren't in prison, you know, they weren't killed. They were allowed to live there. And so 70 years later, you've got a whole nother generation going on with kids and maybe even grandkids, right? They didn't all come back. 90% of them did not come back. Only about 10% came back. And so you take all of this Judah with Simeon in there and you put it out, then you only get 10% back. It's basically just Judah is left. Now I say that because you have Judah betraying Jesus, but as a whole, you have Judah, everybody betraying the Messiah. The Lion of the tribe of Judah is betrayed by Judah, the whole people. He came to that which was his own, and his own did not receive him. Right? But it's not just that. Jesus is referred to in Scripture as the second Adam, sort of. The first man, Adam, and then you have Jesus, right? He's like the second Adam, but the first fruits of God, but the second Adam, sort of. There's a sense in which he also came to humanity. We can't just blame the Jews. We can't just blame Judah in the story of Jesus' rejection. It wasn't just the Jewish nation. We all take part. And I think I've said this before. Because even though you could say the Jews crucified Jesus, and I think the text says that, but we know technically they didn't. Who did? The Romans. They did it because of political pressure under Pilate. They did it because they wanted to appease, this leadership. They didn't care. They didn't care if it was innocent blood. It was a political decision. Romans did it, but the Jews did it. Everybody did it. And I'm telling you that because here's the thing. When we get to the cross, and we're getting really close to that in Mark, when we get to the cross, when we come to the cross, we only get there, well, probably one of two ways if we're going to be at the cross. We get there as Judas, or we get there as Peter. Now, why did I say Judas' story is given in 3 parts? 3 separate scenes. Anybody know anything about the betrayal that Peter did? And we're given all 3. I thought the rooster crows 3 times, but only twice, if you look at it. I thought we got each rooster crow, but I think it's only twice now. But still, the betrayal happens in 3 scenes. Did you think of that while I was talking about Judas? Yeah, I thought you might. Anybody else? When we thought about Judas betraying Jesus in 3 scenes, anybody else's mind go to Peter? Yeah. You've got Peter who betrays Jesus 3 times. And then you've got Judas' betrayal in 3 scenes. 3 scenes of Peter, 3 scenes of Judas. And they're a lot alike. They both have this other idea of Messiah. They both are trying to save Jesus' life. Why does Peter start swinging a sword? When Jesus is being arrested, why is he swinging a sword? He's trying to save Jesus. I think that's why Judas tries to get Jesus together with the religious establishment. So they're really alike. They both grieve their betrayal. Isn't that right? Don't they both grieve their betrayal? They both run away. At some point, Peter says, well, I'm going fishing. And I've said it before, we're not talking about enjoying some fishing. We're not even talking about ocean fishing where you're like, we're not talking about that. That's still a vacation kind of thing. We're talking about working all night with a net in your hands, throwing it over, pulling it in. How much does that rope weigh when it's full of water? It's a lot of work. They both ran away. But there's a difference. What's the difference between Peter and Judas? One of them gave no chance for meeting Jesus again. Gave no chance for a moment with Jesus. No chance for a repentance that would bring forgiveness. There was grief, there was sorrow, but he ran away and took his life. Peter, completely grieved, ran away, but like the shepherd who goes after that lost sheep, Jesus went and found him. I think Jesus talks about his sin. I think Peter's really sad. But Peter takes his place with Jesus. He receives forgiveness. Every one of us, when we stand, if we're going to stand before the cross, maybe some people will never do that. But for anybody who comes to the cross, we come as a Judas. Has anybody in here never betrayed God? Never chose not to trust? Or had moments of not trusting? I think it's important that we know that. We come as a Judas. We are Judas. And we come as a Peter. We come as sinners to the cross. If we don't know that, how can you be forgiven if you don't think you need forgiveness? We come before the cross broken and sinful, recognizing our sin, and hopefully, like Peter, able to accept forgiveness, able to hear Jesus say, "Do you love me? Then get back in here. Feed my sheep. Wait on tables. Help your neighbor," whatever it is. Do you love me? Yeah, I love you, but I didn't, but I failed. No, we're not talking about that. Do you love me? Get back in here. So we're all potentially Judas, but hopefully we're all Peters. But never think that Judas is out there. He's not out there. I mean, he might be, but that's not the Judas in the Bible. The Judas in the Bible is in here. In here. And you got to know that heading to the cross. Because the cross is about forgiveness, about recognizing sin, and accepting Jesus as a Savior. If that message touches your heart, and you need to find Jesus on the shore with a fire and some fish, you can come up and talk to us this morning. We're going to sing a song. We give that time for you to make known what's on your heart, what's moved you. If there's a need you have for prayer, and you're welcome to come just to ask for prayer, for whatever it is. We'd love to pray for you. We make that time right now as we sing this song.